So you bring people together in a group that starts to facilitate ideas and conversations, but you have to back that up with a roadmap that says how you're going to devolve that responsibility throughout the organisation, and you have to set the objective to break the team up as the first thing that the team agrees. If you achieve that, I think then you have a model to accelerate and then a model to devolve responsibility.
Just a quick show of hands. Who here is in a DevOps team or has DevOps in their job title? Oh, excellent. Excellent. Right, so you're all doing it wrong. Would you guys say that you'd ever move away from having that need to have a platform engineering team, people who help set the standards, help give guidance, help, I mean, is it feasible to have, teams just doing whatever they want? One team's using Chef, one team's using Puppet, one team's using Jenkins, one team's using TeamCity, one
I think it depends on the size of the organisation and also kind of the journey that they're going on. Obviously, you're going to have experts in certain areas, and I think it's always good that those experts come together and kind of bleed into smaller kind of DevOps teams. I don't like that word, but to help facilitate. But I wouldn't necessarily have a conversation directly with a platform team or with a build and release team. I feel they should be kind of bleeding into my teams and helping me along my journey with their skill set and their expertise.
Just a quick question. How many folks here are majority presence in the cloud? Not a lot. Okay.
Wow.
At Skype, it was not in the cloud, as it were. I left there a year ago. They've obviously moved on in their journey since then. But the current company I'm at, WorldRemit, we're 90% Azure-based. And so with the pace of change and innovation that's coming from Microsoft with PaaS capabilities in Azure, it's not hard to imagine a world in 3, 4 or 5 years where that platform as a service kind of capability inside an organization shrinks to because so much of it will be offered as a subscription service that we can just purchase from Microsoft. And I actually had to hire someone recently whose job it is to keep up with the innovations that Microsoft are basically almost suffocating us with, so that we can keep moving forward faster. So I think that there's always a role in any organization for whether it's site reliability or service engineering or platform engineering, what you want to call it, that team that kind of sets the standards for, how things go out, how they operate in the wild, how that information gets back to the development team who wrote the feature in the first place, etc. But I do think, like so many things, it is about shrinking the number of people and roles that are required to take care of an ever-increasing, estate, if you like.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that, I completely agree with everything you said. It's about allowing teams to move independently. So what you want to avoid at all costs is creating a silo that becomes a bottleneck that slows everyone down. It's about, if you do have a centralized team, they should be delivering capabilities and innovation that everyone can pick up and use freely and without the direct involvement of that team once it's out in the wild.
So there was a question over there.
I'm changing the subject, is that allowed?
Yeah, you can. Did anybody have a follow-up question on that topic thing? In which case you can change the topic as much as you like, sir.
If you're operating in a highly regulated environment where you've got some heavy compliance requirements, how do you reassure customers that it's okay for your developers to be making changes to production infrastructure?
Since you work in financial services...
I was just about to say, since for my sins, I was responsible for all of the PCI controls at Skype, and obviously WorldRemit is also basically, some people call us a bank, some people call us e-commerce, but we're still heavily regulated. And I used to have this argument with Deloitte Luxembourg all the time because they're the people who do Skype's books. And it was an incredibly long, horrible journey to take the auditors on, and the political bloodbaths that ensued in trying to get the auditors to understand that we have 5 terabytes of logs. No, you cannot just go and check the logs for privileged access reviews of who has looked at X, Y, and Z. It doesn't work that way. No, you can't just look at our change management logs, because we don't have CAB anymore. I killed it. July 6, 2015, it died.
Was that before or after Skynet became alive? What was the date? I can't remember.
I'll be honest with you. I think, like so many things, a positive relationship with your auditors is really important. Due diligence about the changes that you plan on making, whether those are policy changes or standards changes or process changes or actual technology changes, is really important. Documenting, and here we're not talking about configuration management and lightweight documentation of code, but actual documentation of business decisions that were made and why they were made. Auditors need to see those things because they need to understand that you didn't just do something willy-nilly, that you thought it through. But for the most part, that will be a journey that you have to take them on. You will find yourself, even if you're dealing with, one of the top big 5, one of the ABCs, you will find yourself educating them about why you're going to go to continuous delivery, about why actually, the deployments.
Take a breath.
Yeah, I was going to say, you will find yourself, explaining to them why, your Slack channel for your deployments is pinging every 30 minutes with a new release and why that's actually a good thing. But you'll have to educate them. And there aren't many auditors out there who understand the journey yet. So
I think it's probably fair to say that there is more and more material in the DevSecOps area. I mean, I actually sort of think SANS actually now publish a list of 10 or 20 recommended controls for DevOps. Do you know what I mean? So there is guidance trying to help you in that area.
I think Jeffrey Snover summed it up quite well in his presentation this morning. There are those partners in the marketplace that are going to come on a journey with you, and there are those that don't get this journey they're on. And you need to kind of, work with partners in this space that are going to understand what the compliance is and how best to achieve it in a modern, cloud-based, fast flow of work situation where the controls that we had imposed were put in without good reason in some instances, or are not actually making the systems more secure and safer for customers and businesses. So I think finding partners that are willing, and partnership goes both ways. They're willing to contribute as much as you are to modernising this is the way forward.
Assuming it's a kind of two-way street, and I'm thinking about how I bring US federal government with me on this journey.
Slowly.
Actually, I think
that's the issue. Is that if you're trying to forge a path, and either you've got to persuade customers that what you're doing is okay, or you've got to persuade a government organisation on who you depend for a rubber stamp.
I would say on that I wouldn't underestimate their ability to kind of change at the moment. I mean, the rate of change that we're seeing is so rapid. A few years ago, we probably all would have sat in this room and said we'd have no government organizations hosting applications in the cloud. And today, they're in the public cloud environment. So, don't underestimate what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I will say one little trick that I had up my sleeve at Skype was the Deloitte Luxembourg team were not able to understand the conversation. So we called Deloitte Seattle. And those guys working with Microsoft really understood that conversation. So sometimes it's about leveraging your network and getting the right people to have the conversation with them. So we had Deloitte Seattle fly over to see Deloitte Luxembourg, and problem solved magically.
I think it's also worth mentioning that in the government thing, obviously you've got GDS here in the UK, and despite as much GDS has some good and bad things, but they've definitely set some really interesting directions that the expectation of the rest of central government are going to follow. And basically, the GDS playbook has been nicked by the US government. They've called it 18f.com or 18f.gov, And it's basically the GDS playbook lifted and shifted and with a little bit of an American twist. So I think if you're thinking that the governments are going to be lagging massively behind, you need to go actually out there and see what they're doing, because some of them do get this, and they are going to be pushing the departments to move forward. But as I said, Ministry of Justice, hosts stuff in AWS. Ministry of Defence hosts stuff in Azure. A lot of people host stuff in Skyscape. So I mean, for every government department that says we can't do it in the cloud, I can point to a government department that's running everything up to top secret in the cloud. So Pete?
Thank you. Peter Warner from Recipients. My answer to that question would be, why not bring the compliance guys into the team and make them part of the team?
Yeah.
Which leads me to the question I'd like to ask, which is, what are your top 3 tips for changing the culture in an organisation to make it be agile, be DevOps, rather than do agile or do DevOps?
I'm not sure I've got 3. Let me think.
I'm
definitely
just give one. Give
I'll
your
go
top
with
one, and that'll give us 4.
I'll go with one. And I think my number 1 tip for anybody who's going through this is to recognise how hard it can be. And that sounds really negative, but I think some people go into this and they think there's a silver bullet and it's just going to all transform overnight. But no, we're humans, and we're very complicated creatures, and we have habits, and we have alliances, and we have behaviours that are ingrained in us over years and years. And actually making cultural change is essentially as hard as quitting smoking or stopping to bite your nails. It's about reprogramming how each individual in the organisation interacts with each other and how they behave. And I think that's a long process, and you will be taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And people shouldn't beat themselves up when that happens. They should just recognise that they do have a vision, and it's just about making progress little by little by little.
Stephen?
My biggest one's probably that DevOps isn't just dev and operations, it's actually everybody else. It's security, it's compliance, it's actually HR as well. Because when you're employing the right people, you need to employ the right people that have got the right mindset and have the right skill set as well. That's probably my number 1.
Amy?
So I'd say it sounds like a pat answer, but it's a lot more complicated than this. But find a problem that really hurts and fix it with DevOps. So the last 2 places I've been, actually what's really hurt has been any kind of service impacting event or outage. So take that and fix it with a DevOps approach or DevOps values. So that's what we've done at WorldRemit. We wrote an incident management framework which told people how to talk about incidents, how to categorize the impact it was having. So people stopped waking up at 3 a.m. for 5 transactions and only woke up at 3 a.m. for 500 transactions. To start bringing those kinds of DevOps values to a real problem that will actually change the quality of life for the people in your organization. And next thing you know, people are a lot more receptive to, maybe we could do a little bit more around deployments, or maybe we could do a little bit more around an on-call rota. So in my experience, finding a real problem and giving a solution that incorporates the values of DevOps is a good, beachhead to start from.
James?
Don't change culture. That's the first thing I would suggest. It's about trying to influence behaviour and habit. So if you walk in with a mindset and start telling people you're going to change culture, you're going to put up a wall and a silo and a barrier instantly. If you go in and start asking questions like, how are we going to get better at what we're doing today, and what changes are we going to make to do that, what habits that we think we could influence, it's a much smaller, easier start. And then it's about trying to reinforce the things that we do well, stop doing the things we're doing badly, and start doing things that are going to improve life. So I wouldn't try and change culture directly.
Would it be fair to say that there are a lot of organisations that when anybody from the outside objectively comes in and looks at what you're doing and you go, this doesn't make any sense at all? So I think part of the process is finding those things that, why are you doing this way? I mean, no logical person would design a process like this,
Even in organisations that are kind of out there as the pinnacle, maybe Amazon, Etsy, if you looked at the behaviours that they're following, you'd probably also say none of this makes sense. but it works for them, right? So I don't think there's a wrong and right answer here. There's things that kind of improve life. There's good practices that we see, but the way they're applied in each organization is different, and you can't underestimate those differences between organizations, I think.
I don't think so. No, I think it's bringing the right people with the right skills to do the right job and to bring value to that team. Whoever you've put in that team, as long as they bring value, and as long as they're bringing value to the business and value to the customer, at the end of the day, they're the right people to do that job. You know, I come from a development background. I'm currently doing infrastructure. I'm not the best person to be doing infrastructure. We have an infrastructure guy with us. It's a way of sharing and collaborating and making sure that everybody understands each other's jobs and everybody has a respect for everybody else.
I think the technology, the challenges out there, the whole space is so deep and broad that you can't have individuals with all that knowledge. It's almost impossible. So the goal has to be building multidisciplinary teams where you have people with a specialism, but there are some broad ground rules where people have a general knowledge. I think one of the big differences, you know, where the experience brings is if you take networks or security or database administration, lots of people can understand the how and the what to do some of these things, but where people's specialism fits in is the why we do these things. Why do we segregate networks? Why does this security change kind of improve life? You know, lots of people could understand maybe how to change the rules on a firewall, but do they realize the impact that's going to have? And I think without having a broad range of skills in a multidisciplinary team, you're not really going to be able to harness the power of people's creativity.
I wrote a blog post on this about 3 years ago called the Myth of the Generalist, and so you can go and read that on the DevOpsGuys blog. But, you know, Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations, if anybody studied economics, you know, the role of having a specialist doing a specialist role, I mean, that argument was won 100 years ago. You are not going to find a generalist who is as good as somebody that's been doing SQL Server for 20 years or somebody that's been doing X, Y, Z for a period of time. The challenge is those guys that have been doing SQL Server for 20 years and don't give a shit what the apps devs are doing or what the QA people are doing, or the fact that I'm just going to re-index this thing in the middle of the day and make the SAN go nuts and take everything else down. So that's the behaviour. It's, you know, there is no such thing as this uber generalist. It's a complete myth. You've got to have specialists. They've got to be they often refer to T-shaped. So deep with one technical speciality, but you've got to care enough about the people on the other side to actually try and make their life easier. Don't stay in this mindset of just my life, I care about it. all I want to do is do SQL Server. You've got to be T-shaped enough to understand the challenges that everybody else has. Richard?
I actually argue that it's Y-shaped rather than T-shaped.
Y-shaped. Oh, okay. Oh, quick, on the board. Do we have a pen? I want to see a Y-shaped person. Yeah, black one might be better actually, Rich. Thank you. Show your working, sir. Show your working.
I agree with your take your T-shape analogy, specialism. Rather than being aware, I think you're going to find that your skill sets are going to have to be going from a very shallow knowledge of a lot of things, so across the span of operations, development, because these guys have got to communicate, and that's one of the things that really hasn't come across today, is that communication is the foundation of all of this.
Yeah.
It's people talking to people. That you need that very broad knowledge to enable those communications, and then your knowledge gets shallower but deeper, and then you've got the specialism.
Yeah.
That's why I said Y-shape.
Yeah. Guys, thoughts on that? Amy?
But you can have more if you've got somebody who's a SQL Server expert and an Exchange expert. Then yeah, you've got two spikes. But it depends on the organisation. It depends on how they're organised. But ultimately, you're going to have that broad knowledge of skills at least a shallow level to enable the communication. Because
if you don't understand so what's your job? If you don't understand this other person's role at all,
yeah.
How can you have a meaningful conversation with them?
At the one end, you've got the out-and-out developer. The other end, you've got the out-and-out infrastructure specialist. They need enough common skills and enough common knowledge to be able to have that communication to enable your DevOps to work.
Which is why we're here. Thoughts, guys?
I have to say I quite like it, and not heard the why as opposed to the T before, but in our organization, as we move away from component teams towards feature teams, I think that makes a lot more sense, actually, and it'll actually be a way that I'll be able to communicate with both HR in terms of recruitment as well as my CTO in terms of what we're actually looking for.
I'll send you the address for the royalties.
Yeah. No problem.
I would say one last point on the deep part of the specialism part. I would honestly say that there is something that happens to your brain when you know something in intricate level of detail. If you don't have an expertise or a specialism in something, find it and just pick one thing, whatever it is, and become the best person that you know on that topic. Because I genuinely think having that level of deep expertise changes something in your brain in a way that you think and the way that you see the problem. In that, if you only ever surface up here in a shallow generalism, you don't get it. I mean, that's only a personal feeling. I don't know whether people... Stephen, you're nodding?
Yeah, I agree with that completely. It's better to have a specialism, like you're saying, than just be okay at everything. You know, I'd rather be the go-to guy for something and add value to the team that I'm in for that reason than just be like, oh, you know that Steve, he's kind of okay at this and he's actually okay at that. I'd rather be, here's the person to go to talk about infrastructure, or here's the person to go to talk to about CI or whatever thing you're needing.
I think what I like about that approach is that then you can champion that inside an organisation. So we talked about kind of the platform engineering piece. I mean, my view is the same around architecture. You want to kind of push architecture as a core competency into all teams, but then you want people who are really passionate about architecture to lead the way, create that cross-team collaboration, so you kind of have a mechanism of breaking silos. Because ultimately, if you create loads of multidisciplinary delivery teams with the capability to do everything and they never need to reach outside, you just created more silos. So you've got to find a way of collaborating across delivery teams, and specialist areas like that is one example.
Yeah, I was going to say sharing is one of the pillars of DevOps, isn't it? So even if you are an expert in something and you want to learn about something else, I mean, I think it's about sort of giving permission within teams and organisations to actually cross-pollinate some of those skills and have it very much sort of led by the individual. It's like you said, you know, you'd rather be known to be an expert in something, but I bet you became an expert in it because you went and you asked people who already had that expertise and they shared it with you, and this is how we all get better collectively. And not everyone will ever reach that sort of high-level expert, but when you share your knowledge, everybody takes a step up.
You don't look very happy, like maybe we didn't answer your question.
Okay, cool. Just a question? Yep.
Yeah, could you just walk us through your journey of killing Tab in July 2015?
I really need to check when Skynet became alive.
It was an interesting journey. We were planning on killing it. We were, talking about the best way to approach it. And then we found out that at a senior management meeting off-site, that one of the other managers who was not part of the service engineering organization had announced that Cab was dead. So we had to move very quickly to actually make that happen. Yeah. So that was funny but true story. I think for me, the biggest thing about CAB was, Skype used to hold CAB every Tuesday at lunch for Europe, and every Friday in the late afternoon to hit the West Coast US teams. And what became really obvious as we got ready for every CAB set, and the guys who worked for me were basically the release managers. Effectively, all they did was prep the agenda for CAB. 2 people full-time prepping an agenda for CAB. If that doesn't scream there are some efficiencies to be made here. So one of the first things that we did was actually start thinking about, well, what is happening at CAB that is of value? And what we very quickly realized was it was the conversations. It was whether or not the rest of the business was ready for what was about to happen. And then we asked ourselves what was wrong with CAB. And for us, CAB was a bottleneck for continuous delivery. We had 115 development teams. We could be releasing, new code every day, but we weren't because we, scheduled CAB twice a week and they had to go. So from those kind of conversations, we quickly realized that the real problem was accountability. That the engineering managers or the development managers, the people who managed the guys and girls writing the software, no longer had accountability for what they wrote. They gave that accountability up to the members of the CAB. And so the big thing for us was to push that accountability right back to the people who write the code. And that was why killing CAB became so very, very important. It wasn't just getting rid of the twice a week, bottleneck. It was making people accountable for what they put out there in the wild. So we started off. We had a 2-prong approach. The first prong was actually changing the tooling and the automation that forced sign-offs by CAB and checked for that kind of thing before deployments could go live. So we actually had to change some physical and some physical technology and some policy and standards in order to get through audit the next year. But the second thing that we did was, an education program for the development managers to say, hey, guess what? We're taking off the training wheels. It's yours. You got it back. Do what you want. And then the third thing, actually, there was a third thing that we had to do is that we very quickly realized the other value that CAB brought was visibility. And I noticed, I think it was Michael Green earlier today was talking about visibility. And my colleagues from WorldRemit will recognize this from me. That visibility into what has changed and understanding that stuff's going to go out all the time and you need to know where to look for what happened if you're looking at an outage or you're looking at different, service metrics, etc. That visibility into the changes is really, really important. So those are the 3 things that we focused on when we killed CAB.
So, curious, quick question. Who here would say they still operate in a traditional CAB model where you have a weekly, monthly meeting? How many of you would rather be beaten with a cricket bat than go to another CAB meeting? Yeah, good, that's what I thought.
I was going to say, I've never killed CAB, but CAB almost killed me when I started my career.
I think on the making work visible, James made a fantastic quote 3 years ago when we went into a government department, and I just keep coming back to it. And we walked out after this initial meeting with this department, and he said, I saw lots of plans on the walls, but I didn't see a lot of work on the walls. And that really stuck with me, and I keep coming back to it. And it's like there was all these Gantt charts and things about where the project was and moving and having all these charts showing you where the project was in this big, big thing. What were you doing today? What did you do yesterday? What are you doing tomorrow? What was achieved today? What's blocked? What's with the customer? What's with what team? Get that work visible was, such a huge thing.
Why? Because it creates conversation.
Exactly.
Came back to the communication thing. Anything we can do to facilitate that conversation is really powerful. And I think visualizing work is one of the most powerful things we can do to stimulate conversation because it really brings people together. Multiple people are involved in making that work flow through the system, and that's the first point you can talk about it, is when you can see it.
Questions, anyone? Or I'll ask another question off my list. Yeah.
What about Agile or like DevOps? We've got a lot of software, huge amount of software, a lot of it very old legacy software. We used to have dedicated support function, and then we became Agile, right? So we got rid of that. All the support is handed off to private. How does it work in reality? Because it's not really working well at the moment. We're trying to support a huge legacy base with a product team that's dedicated to maybe 3 or 4 platforms globally. So how does it work? Is it better with a dedicated support team? Or is it better to have the support within the team, even if the team isn't actually developing that product? It's dead, it's been dead for years, and it still isn't supported. What's the experience in that?
I'm looking at the people who have worked with it, WorldRemit, who are laughing at me right now because they know what I'm about to say. There was a presentation about 3 weeks ago at WorldRemit where I got up in front of everyone and I said, and stop using the word legacy. It's current production. It brings in the money. It keeps our customers happy. It's why you have a job. And 10 minutes later, the CTO got up and said, I heard what Amy said, and it's legacy.
Right. So send your CV.
I think it probably depends on the flavor of your organization and the size and the shape of your legacy and what real value it has to your business and what your strategy is for moving off of it and how quickly that strategy will be implemented, etc. But me personally, the few places that I've been where they've had that dichotomy between legacy or current production and where they're trying to get to really quickly, I've personally always fallen on the side of somebody has to keep the lights on and take care of it. And that doesn't mean, super glue and duct tape. It means actually taking care of it.
I think an interesting thing as well is where I'm currently working, they have this concept of a life cycle team, and basically what they do is they look after the, quote, legacy applications that 3/4 of them don't even know what it's about, where it is, how many servers there are in production, where production even is. And something that I was talking to James about last week is the burnout in that team is absolutely incredible. They last three to 9 months in that team, and then they're out. They'll quit the company because there's just so much stress. They don't know whether they're coming or going. I think it's important, and it's something that I remember, Chris, you were talking about Just Eat, and so was Pete, is if you build it, you support it, you monitor it, you maintain it. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that I would take away, something that I'm trying to introduce at PDS, is that every product team that builds something, they are the ones that put it into production and they're the ones that look after it. It doesn't need to go to another third-party team that don't have any idea of why did you decide to use Knockout.js instead of Angular. I don't know any Angular.js skills, so I'm absolutely useless on this project. It's a shared ownership, and I think I don't like the word legacy because it means it's just going to get forgotten about, and I don't think anything should be forgotten about if it's running in production.
The question I would ask is kind of, what are the business objectives? What are the key results? And how does the application that your team are supporting or that group of people are supporting tie into that? Because if you can chain that kind of value stream together, then you can start to understand kind of, well, how important is this to the business? What effort should we be putting into it? But more importantly, if we stop doing support around this area or we start doing support in this area, what impact does that have on the business overall? And lots of organizations don't understand that. They're just going through the mechanics of supporting an application that's been there forever. And it's kind of like, well, do we actually understand if this is making us better as an organization? Is it, what impact would it have if we change things in this area? Or are we just doing this because we did it yesterday and the day before and the last 5 years? So I think like value stream mapping, where that fits in and understanding the wider picture is quite important before you start to understand, should it be supported in this group or by this group of people, or what ownership should we be wrapping around it? Does that make sense? Do you understand kind of where it fits in the overall objectives or what the business is trying to achieve? Or yeah.
It's like the team that wrote it doesn't exist. People went on and moved on a long time ago, but we support that going forward. Because they're all the teams that do new stuff, right? And they'll support the stuff that they're writing, right? But who supports the stuff that they're using? It's still life cycle.
One thing that I notice time and time again is that actually, as a sort of profession, as an industry, we're really not very good at decommissioning. I mean, the end of a product's life cycle, it should be dead. It should not be running on any hardware.
It's because we run projects and not products.
Exactly. It is project-based thinking. I mean, all of these things need to have a shelf life and an end date on them. And I think that's probably something product owners need to be educated by their teams on, about how you get out of those sort of situations, because it's technical debt and it's gonna weigh you down and slow you down. Oh, okay. Well, yeah.
So that's a good question. I was going to follow up on that one. Is this whole, projects versus products, managing something from inception through to when it's no longer in production. I mean, and hands up here, the last time if anybody actually took something out of production. Well done.
Well done.
It's pretty rare. I mean, most organisations don't. They just keep building.
And
their tech
did
debt.
the world end? Nope.
So
What a surprise.
projects versus products. You want to sort of explain a bit more on that, or people share their thoughts?
How long have we got?
Yeah, keep it short.
I think it comes back to something Hannah said. I mean, when you look at the product life cycle, it includes a retirement phase, and it's not something we're very good at. We run these kind of short-term initiatives that have a start and an end and no real afterthought.
Mm-hmm.
So in lots of organizations, we spin up unicorn teams to go on, our A team, Team 1 or Team A, whatever you want to call it. They execute the shit out of that project, and then they go on to the next one, handing over their legacy to someone else who's got to support it. So it just breeds the wrong mentality of ownership from the very beginning.
I think for me, one of the things that I'm very keen to introduce to the workplace in order to combat, in the future, to combat the problem you're talking about is not to talk about the project, not to talk about a product, but to talk about the health of the live service, and to try to convince the organization that actually it doesn't matter which team you're in and which little thing you're writing or working on, and is it a component, is it a bounded context, is it a microservice? Doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, all those things get deployed into the wild and they create a service with a capital S, and that is what your customers use, what pays your paycheck, etc. And so that's when the idea of decommissioning becomes important, because if the thing, service, microservice, whatever hierarchy you have, if that thing impacts the live service and the health of the live service, then you have to talk about decommissioning it. And if it doesn't, then maybe the decommissioning path takes longer. But I think if people focus on the idea of a live service, you start to move away from current prod and legacy, or greenfield, etc. You start just talking about the things in the context of that live service. I think that's actually an important paradigm shift that, I'd love to know from hands here, do people think we're already good at it? Have people, if you've already shifted to that kind of mindset in your own business, you raise your hand? So based on that, I'm going to say that I might be right.
How many? I've worked in large enterprise IT organisations for most of my career, and I've built infrastructure that nobody ever used because the project got cancelled halfway through. I've run systems when I don't know what the value of that system is to the organisation or to the actual end user, because I didn't really know what the end user was or needed. I mean, how many of you can honestly sort of say, of all the systems I run, I really understand how it delivers value to my customers? Do you even know who your customers are? Do you even know why you wrote this application in the first place? Does your CIO even know why it's there? And this is to me is right at the heart of the cultural element of DevOps. Is trying to make people understand, why are we doing these things? Stop doing all the things that are stupid, and do the things that add value for our customers.
But it's got to be done with data, not with someone's perception.
Yeah.
So don't make an assumption that you think you should be doing it this way, but you're not quite sure. And then you roll it into production, it's actually adding no value at all. Get some monitoring and some monitoring around your production environment, and make sure the change you do make is going to add value and it's proven. So you can go back to the business or the customer and say, look, based on these metrics that we've got over the last 3 weeks, we can see that X, Y, and Z. So the next set of stories that we need to be working on, we need to tackle at least one of these to make your service better.
So metrics is obviously, culture, automation, lean, metrics and sharing, one of the, 5 pillars of DevOps. What metrics do you guys track, or what metrics would you recommend, to really help people kickstart a DevOps cultural and transformation? Anyone?
One of the biggest things I think people value is value.
Yeah.
Just understanding the value of the stuff that you're working before you actually do it, to be able to measure it against everything else.
So customer value, if you can measure it. What else? Cycle time is the one that people quote the most.
Cycle time, but I think the sort of state of DevOps report pointed to deployment pain.
Yep.
And I think Amy, you mentioned it. If you can make that go away,
yep.
Or you can alleviate that in some way, shape, or form, if your team is suffering from that, then that's a really good indicator that you're on the right path. And it will also mean that people sleep better and are less stressed and anxious about change.
And it's not just one metric. There's no silver bullet. So we've talked a lot about trying to build this balanced scorecards of metrics that make sense to your organization. So, we've mentioned a few, but there's some business-orientated metrics as well. If you really want to kind of try and make this initiative inclusive, you're going to have to start talking to the business about metrics that are important to them. So, is that customer satisfaction? Is that revenue? Is it a profitability number? Cycle time? How does that impact? It's kind of, and that's why I like the value stream.